In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can take a panel any panel you can trim down to 23 inches wide by 41 inches tall. You can use this pattern. And you can say pick a panel and pick a block. So if you pick any panel that you can cut down to 23 by 41 and any 9-inch block, you can make this quilt and by using these same instructions. Because the 3 quilts you just saw, there were 2 in the large size, which finishes 68 by 86, and there was 1 of them in the medium size, which finishes 55 by 73. And there were 3 different blocks in those quilts. The first one had a star block, the second one had the floating shoe fly block, and the third one, the Christmas one, had the Jacob's ladder block, and there are instructions for all of those. Page 1 and 2 show you how to piece the quilt, and 3 and 4 give you instructions for piecing these 3 blocks. They all finish at 9 inches, but you can choose any block that finishes 9 inches. This is the star block that was on the patriotic quilt, and these points float, so you don't have to worry about cutting off your star points. And this is the floating shoe fly block, and this shows you how to make one, and this one also floats, so you're not going to cut off any points. And here are the Jacob's ladder. Here's the Jacob's ladder block that I used on the 3rd quilt. For all 3 of these blocks have separate videos for piecing the block, so those are listed in the description below the video, and you can also download this pattern in the description below the video. So look for any fabric panels you have that you can trim down to 23 by 41, and you can use these exact instructions. So now let's go on to see how you piece the quilt. And the first thing you're going to do is cut your fabric into strips, and the instructions will tell you which fabric and how many strips to cut and what widths to cut, and you'll label those. Like, for instance, the light fabric is for borders 1, 3, and 5. So here's borders 1 and 3, they're the same width, and here's border 5. So cut out your strips, label what border numbers they are, and then we're going to take them and sew them together end to end. So you're going to have one long piece. So these have already been sewed and pressed, and they're ready to attach the borders when we get to that point. The only thing you might want to not do is the binding. Sometimes if you put the quilt together and the fabric you've chosen for the binding, you decide you don't really like it, so you might want to switch that out. So I would leave the binding till when you're ready to cut it, and unless you're sure that that's the one you want to use. Okay, so we're all ready for these. Now next, we're going to show you how to trim up the panel. Now most panels have some sort of frame on it, and we're going to use that. So the frame is up here and then also down at the bottom. And we're going to use that to help us center the design in order to cut it, to trim it down. You're going to try to keep it as straight as possible. And either way, you want to press everything out. Press all the creases out like it came off the bolt and everything. So press it really good and use starch if you want to. So if you don't have a frame, just try to get it as straight as possible and then pin it in place. But since we have a frame, I'm going to show you how I do this. So I'm going to take this corner here, and I'm going to take just a point, any point in the corner, and then pick it up and then get the same point on the other side. I'm looking at it through the back side. So you want to make the pin go perpendicular. So let's see, and perpendicular means straight into the fabric, and then pin it down. And do the same thing on the other side. Find the same spot, put your pin in, and put it in the opposite side, right here, and have it perpendicular, and then pin it. Now you have that in place. If you want to put more pins in, you can. And so then we're just going to flatten it out here, so this is the middle part. And then we're going to trim this down to, let me fold this way. So the lengthwise has to be 41 inches. So I'm folding it again. So now I have 4 layers, and I'm matching again this frame. If you want to put another pin in there, you can, but I'm just going to kind of eyeball it there. If we want to trim it down to 41 inches, half of that is 20.5 inches. So I'm just going to use my board here and look up 20.5 inches. So now we have our length of 41 inches. So now we've cut our length and we want to cut our width now. So we're going to fold, this is still folded in half, and I'm going to fold it up again like this and try to keep it as straight as you can get it. And if you can, match the frame. Here it's a little bit off, but I'm going to try to get as close as I can. And now we're going to find the center point. And to do this, we're just going to fold it in half. And again, we're matching our same points on this frame. And we're going to put a pin right in the middle. We're just marking the center point of this width. Now we want to trim this down to 23 inches. So half of 23 is 11.5. And this point where we mark the midpoint, we're going to put that on the 11.5 mark on our cutting mat. So here I have it at 11.5. And then once you do that, you're going to cut the 0 point on this side and the 23 point on this side. And you can kind of look how the pattern is. And if you want to adjust it a little bit to make it look even, because this looks like this is all going to get cut off, but this is going to leave a little bit here. So let's move it over just a little bit. So we're going to have a little bit of this color here in the side, but that will probably be taken up in the seam allowance. So now we're going to cut on 23 and we're going to cut on 0. And let's cut on 0 over here. And now you have trimmed your panel down to 23 width and 41 length. Now we're going to start adding borders. We'll start with border number 1. On page 2, you'll see the cutting instructions for each of the borders. And we're going to start with border number 1. And it's the 2-inch long strip, which is for border 1 and 3. And it'll tell you how many pieces to cut and what length. And in this case, we're going to cut 2 at 41 inches because we're always going to add the side borders to the quilt first, and then we'll add borders to the top and bottom. Now I'm going to show you how I cut borders, the length they're supposed to be cut. So we're going to take this, and I let it hang down off of the table. And the first thing I'm going to do is cut off the selvage edge here. So what you're going to do is use your 120-inch measuring tape. And I start the measuring tape at the edge, and then I just kind of hold on to it together with the fabric, and I'm going to measure out 41 inches. So there's my 41 inches. And I hold it together in place with my right hand, and I'm going to slide this ruler underneath, and I'm going to line up one of the lines with the top edge of the ruler and the other one with the 41. So then I move this out of the way and cut my 41 inches. So then I take this, put it to the side, and measure my second one. And since this is the seam allowance here, I'm just going to cut it off because it's too close to the edge. So we take that out. Okay, again, we're going to line up the edge and hold on, and we're going to measure out 41 inches again. Well, I got that seam line in there anyway, but that's okay. line up the top edge with one of the lines on the ruler, and then 41 inches, and trim it. Now we're done for that, and we just leave this off to the side. And how I attach these, I'm going to fold this in half, and then I'm going to put a pin in the center to mark the center. And this is the method you're going to use for every border on here, whether it's the top and bottom, whatever border. You're always going to find the center of your border fabric and put a pin. Then we're going to take our panel, and this is the side. I fold it in half as well and match, and then put a pin in the center. Now we're simply going to line up our two pins like this, and then pin it in place. And then I go from the center out to one edge and pin the edge. And some of this you may have to ease in a little bit, and I find the flat surface is really good for that. And we just line up the edges, and I go in the center, and then I keep going in halves and pin. Do the same thing over here. And now go to the other side. Match the edge. Find the half. And then find the other half. And now we're going to stitch this on all the way down. You'll do the same thing on the other side. So this is the right side, this is the left side, and you'll do the same thing with this. I press my seams to the border. And now the instructions say cut 2 at 26 inches, and this will be for the top and the bottom of the quilt. So we take our measuring tape again, measure it out, 26 inches. And there it is right there. Slide this under and cut. So there's one. And measure this, 26 inches. And I use my table so everything can slide off and just hang, because then it makes it nice and flat. So another 26 inches. Now we're going to take the rest of this and fold it back up, because this will be used for border number 3. And we'll put this back here like this and put that back in our stack up at the top. And you attach these borders the same way. Fold it in half and mark it with the pin. And the same thing with this. Now we take our quilt top, and we're going to find the center of this one as well. When I'm doing borders, I always do it the same way, this way. Borders for any quilt. Even if I have a pieced border, and let's say you have 6 blocks on your pieced border, and you might be inclined to just find the center block and mark that. But I always like to fold it in half and measure it, unless you're trying to line up some piecing. But if you're putting a straight border on like this, then I always fold both of the sides in half to find the center. So we'll go off on this side pin, and then we just need one pin here. And then another pin here. And here. So do that to the top and bottom, and then you have attached border number 1. And you're going to keep doing this for border 2 and border 3 because they're all straight borders. The next one is going to be the dark fabric, and then we're going to do another border in the light fabric again. Border number 4 is the pieced border, and you can use any 9-inch block, 9-inch finished block that you want, and you're going to make 24 of them. So it's best to lay them out to make sure that the colors and the fabrics are in a pleasing way, the way you like them. And you can see on page 2, there are 6 blocks here, 6 here, 6 and 6. So you're going to make 4 sets of 6 blocks. And the sides you're going to do first. So you'll have one here that you'll sew on the side and one on the other side, and then you'll put the top and the bottom borders. There's something I forgot to mention when you're putting these borders together. When you piece, say border 1, put the border that you're adding at the top and put the fabric that's already there on the feed dog. So the new border, put it on the top. So if you're going to stitch this border onto here, put it on the top like this and then stitch it. And then the feed dogs will be at the bottom border. It's easier to see what you're doing that way. But when you are piecing, and especially when you're piecing the pieced border, the blocks here, these need to be to the feed dogs. So if you have this and you're going to stitch the pieced block to the quilt, don't have this piecing at the top. If you have it at the top, it's not as easy to ease in. So if you have the piecing at the pieced part at the bottom near the feed dogs can grab those seam allowances there, and it helps to ease in because these straight borders are not going to give. If they're against the feed dogs, they're just going to go. And then you end up just pushing these seam lines away, and it's a big mess. So whenever you have seam lines and you're stitching a straight border, put the seam lines at the bottom with the feed dogs and put the straight border at the top. Here is a close-up. This is the right side border, and you'll want to label each of your borders. Here I said this is right side, the top. So I've stitched on the right side border, and this border you're going to press towards the other border. You're going to press towards border number 3. And then if we slide over here, I put the left side border, and this is labeled left side top, and I've pressed the same thing. So now I will just take the last 2 that I've labeled top and bottom and stitch the top at the top and the bottom at the bottom, and also press towards border number 3. After you finish the top and bottom borders, then just continue with borders 5, 6, and 7. They're all straight borders, and you're going to do them the same way you did 1 through 3, and then you'll be finished with your quilt top. Thank you for watching.